Hello everyone, Frank Spangler here for Learning Media Skills. In today's lesson, I want to talk about some of the things that you can do to get better real-time playback when editing videos on your system. I'll be speaking specifically about my favorite video editing software, Edius Pro, but most of the principles that we will be talking about here could be applied across the board to all video editing systems out there. So if you are a video editor and you are struggling to get real-time playback when editing your videos, I think that you might find some good tips here. Let's get started. About a month ago, my wife started her second YouTube channel. Her first one was doing very well. She has almost 100,000 subscribers now, but she was finding that it was reaching out to a rather narrow niche, and she wanted to try something different to see if she could reach a much wider audience. Now, the first channel that I was helping her with edited just fine on our edit system, even though we were producing and delivering to YouTube in 4K. And even though my system was a couple of years old, we were still able to edit, for the most part, in real time. For that channel, we were using Canon C200 cameras right here in this studio, using the MP4 codec that these cameras record to, and our old edit system worked with these video clips without any issues. It was only as we started her second channel that we started running into some issues. For that channel, we are doing a lot more outdoor, run and gun, on the fly type filming with action cameras like GoPro, GoPro Max, even the iPhone 11 Pro. And as we started to work with this footage on our edit system, we started running into some problems. In attempting to solve some of these issues, I have revisited a lot of the things that can prevent computers from editing video in real time. There are 7 main areas that can affect real-time video editing. Let's go through them together. Of course, the first thing that we need to talk about is the CPU, the central processing unit, the main brain of your computer. Almost all video applications rely heavily on the CPU to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes time to read and decompress all of those different compressed video streams that come in from various sources. How old is your CPU? How fast is it? As you probably know, Intel processors come in a wide variety of speeds. There is i3, i5, i7, and i9. And each have various versions running at various speeds. If you're not sure what your CPU is in your system, you can check by going down to Windows Search and type in System Information. And looking down the list there, you can discover what CPU is running in your system. To process and work with 4K footage, you should have a minimum of i7 running at 9700K. Of course, the faster, the better. The more cores, the better. i9 is better than i7. Now, unfortunately, if your CPU is a couple of years old, there probably is no way of just swapping out your old CPU for another one. You are most likely going to have to upgrade your whole system with a new motherboard. And as we shall see in a moment, there are some very good reasons that you may want to consider that as well. Now, if upgrading your equipment right now is not in your budget, you should at the very least make sure that you have Quick Sync turned on and that it is working with your edit software. For decoding some of the latest codecs that some of the newer cameras are pumping out, some of the phones and drones are putting out these days, it helps to have quick sync turned on. This may require updating your CPU drivers and software, changing some settings in your computer BIOS, but let me assure you, it is worth taking the time to figure out how to do that. If you're not sure, there are plenty of online tutorials. Just get on Google and search how to make sure my quick sync is turned on, or how to turn on quick sync, how to get quick sync to work with my edit software. There's all sorts of help out there if you need that. And if there's enough demand, I can maybe make a tutorial on that myself. Just let me know in the comments below. Most video editing software out there today are developing ways to offload some of the processing workload to the graphics card of your system. Not sure what your graphics card is? Go to Windows, search, and type in Device Manager. Go to Display Adapters, and your graphics card should be listed there. Now, Edius has been a little slower on contracting some of that work out to the graphics card, which is one of the reasons that my edit system was starting to struggle with some of the new H.265 codecs coming in from the latest action cameras, drones, and phones. But to be fair, I also brought some of this footage into Premiere Pro and found that it really didn't work much better there. H.265 in many ways is difficult to work with regardless of the system that you're working on. It just seems like the new cameras are always ahead of the editing system software. They come out with these new codecs and computer systems and software scramble to catch up. The good news for Edius editors is that Grass Valley will be releasing Edius Pro 10 on September 15, and they're telling us that H.265 processing will now work with NVIDIA graphics cards, even starting with some of the older GTX cards, starting with the 1050, or the RTX at 2060 or better. So, if you are struggling with editing video that was encoded to H.265, help is on the way if you have at least an NVIDIA GTX 1050. If you are an Edius editor and you don't have an NVIDIA card in your system, this may be a good time to consider upgrading your video card. How much memory do you have in your system? Not sure? Again, go to your Windows search and type in System Information. And then look down the list there and you will discover how much RAM you have installed in your system. Surprisingly, you can edit video with as little as 16 gigs of RAM. And in fact, some people have reported that they can edit in Edius with only 8 gigs of RAM on a laptop. But you really should have 16, and 32 gigs will give you more headroom. If you like to have other applications open and running at the same time, 64 gigs of RAM would even be better. Edius 10 will be offering what's called background rendering. You can be rendering a project and start on your next one. And for that, I'm guessing that 64 gigs will offer a better multitasking experience. The next bottleneck that can affect the real-time playback in your edit system is the speed of your storage. You can have the latest, fastest, greatest CPU and graphics card, but if your media stored on your hard drive is struggling to get in and out of your computer quick enough, you're still going to stutter on the timeline as you edit. For editing professionally, you would, of course, want to set up a large RAID system for the best transfer speeds. But for the hobbyist or YouTube creator, you may not want to invest in that kind of storage system. So what's the next best system to consider? If you are planning a new build or getting a computer guy to configure a system for you, make sure that the motherboard that you select has two M.2 slots. This allows you to plug in two flash memory drives directly into your motherboard. You can get these in up to 2 terabytes each. Now, when you select the M.2 memory to insert, it is essential that you select the M.2 memory that is called non-volatile memory express. It's usually expressed as NVMe. These cards, plugged directly into your motherboard, will give you speeds of 3,500 megabytes per second. In contrast, regular hard drives are more like 80 to 100 megabytes per second. So, this new system of drives, if we can even call them that, are actually 35 times faster. Not 35% faster. We're talking 35 times faster than regular hard drives. That's a lot faster than a RAID system array, for that matter. And there are no moving parts to break down. With this setup, your workflow would be to upload the media that you are currently working on to the M.2 drives, edit your project, and then archive it to some external, slower hard drives, in case you need to revisit the edit again down the road. But let's say that you are not quite ready to upgrade your system. What else can you do? What's next? Well, if you are on a desktop system and you have room for 2 internal drives, I would recommend getting 2 hard drives that are running at 7,200 RPM. A lot of people are trying to edit video using only slow drives, and that could be your bottleneck. So pick up a couple of high-quality 7,200 RPM drives. They don't have to be large capacity, 2 terabytes each, that would be fine. Pop them into your machine if you are editing a 2-camera project. Put the media from one camera on one drive, the media from the other camera on another drive, and then as you work with those 2 media streams on your timeline, you will discover that you are getting much better real-time playback. If you are editing on a fairly new laptop, there's a good chance that you have some USB 3.1 outputs. And in that case, look for some hard drives that are 3.1 capable. They're not as common out there, but they can be found, and they will give you faster read and write capability. It may be that your new laptop actually has built-in NVMe storage. Or it may actually have an empty slot that you can add an extra NVMe card to. And in that case, you could actually edit your project having your media stored right on the motherboard of your laptop to give you those fast 3,500 read and write speeds. So look for that. Check out your laptop specs. You might be ready to do some very fast editing, real-time editing on your laptop. One of the things that can cause your playback to stutter is if your project settings are different than the media that you are working with. Now, sometimes the media that you are bringing in may be actually shot at various frame rates. And when you start your project, you need to make a decision based on the frame rate of the majority of your footage so that you can determine what would be the best project setting to start with. And then you'll have to deal with the fact that when you come to that media that has been shot at a different frame rate on your timeline, that at that point, your playback is more likely to stutter. For example, you might start out your project at 29.97 progressive, but then bring in some GoPro footage that was shot at film rate or 60p, and now all of a sudden the software is not only having to decode the video, It is having to conform the video to the project frame rate at the same time. And that is going to slow things down. On the subject of settings, there may be some other settings in your software that will give instructions to offload some of the processing work to your graphics card. In Edius, for example, if you go into System Settings and then Importer-Exporter Settings, you will discover that you have the option to assign some of the workload of some of the new RAW codecs like Canon's Cinema Codec, Red Camera, Sony RAW, ProRes RAW. All of these can be assigned to the GPU of your system for processing. Without these turned on, your system is really going to struggle with some of these codecs. One more setting that you'll want to look for is changing the resolution setting on your preview monitor playback. In Edius 9 workgroup version, for example, I can change the resolution of my preview from full res to half res, and often just doing that will give me real-time playback with no stuttering. If I am working with some really challenging codecs, I can bring this right down to 1/16th resolution. And even though it might be kind of blurry on my preview monitor, if I make my preview monitor small, it's still something that I can work with when it comes time to editing. Notice when you stop your playback, it goes to full resolution for a still frame, which allows you to do any color correction that you might want to. This option is also available in Premiere Pro, so look for it there. If you're struggling to play back in real time, just know that there are options to reduce the resolution of your playback monitor, and that will help a lot. If your version of Edius does not have this feature, it is probably because you're not on the workgroup version. I believe it's only available in workgroup. And I would say that if you are trying to work with various 4K codecs, the upgrade to workgroup is probably the cheapest, most effective upgrade that you can make to your system to give you more real-time experience. Another thing that can slow down real-time playback is if your computer is busy doing other things, especially if your memory is limited. This may be After Effects being open in the background. Even if it's not processing something, it can allocate, just having it open, depending on the settings that you have in After Effects, it can allocate a certain percentage of your memory and thus take it away from your video editing software. Other times it may be some hidden software running in the background. It could be your virus protection software that could be causing your whole system to run slowly. You might have spyware on your computer that you don't even know about, malware, taking up resources. And so it's worth looking into. At any time, you can find out what software is running by just hitting Control-Alt-Delete and choose Task Manager. And once you have that open, select See More, and that will give you a good window on what may be eating up the resources of your system. One last tip that I would like to leave you with is if you are capturing the media yourself and you're not working with a client's footage, you would have the opportunity to go into your smartphone, for example, and go into the menu settings and check out what codec the video is being recorded to. Often you will find options between using H.265 or using H.264 or an MP4 codec. I know on the GoPro, for example, we were really struggling with some footage that we shot with the GoPro. and finding that even at 1/16th resolution on our playback monitor was having a difficult time playing in real time without a lot of stuttering. The only way we were, in the end, able to get through the edit is to edit in a proxy format. And if you've ever had to resort to that, you know that it's not the most pleasant. It takes time to render the proxy files, and it's difficult to do any color correction when you're using those proxy files. However, if you are working on a slow, older computer, that is something else to look into. If you want real-time editing, check out proxy editing, and perhaps we'll do a tutorial on that down the road. But I don't like proxy editing, and so I decided to do a little research into what I might be able to change and what was going on with the GoPro that was forcing such a difficult codec to work with. Well, I found out that we had set it to 60 frames a second, so that if we wanted to do some slow motion, we have something to work with there. And I had turned on what's called hyper smooth, and with those two settings in the 4K format, it was forcing GoPro to save to the HVEC format, which is a very highly compressed codec, and makes it very difficult for most computer systems to play that, decode it and play it back in real time, at least at this point. I'm sure that within a year or so, the software and the hardware will catch up. If GoPro can play back these video clips with this little $500 device, you got to know that sooner or later, the computer systems are going to catch up and figure out a way to play those back in real time. But what to do until the software and hardware catch up? Well, doing a little research, I discovered that just by simply changing it to something like shooting at film rate and turning hypersmooth off, then the footage I captured played back on our system in real time with no problem. So it could be just a matter of going into your smartphone, going into your action camera settings, the menu, and selecting MP4 codec instead of these newer HVEC codecs. And that can solve a lot of problems. Well, those are some of the things that I wanted to share with you for now, but I have a feeling that we will have more to share with you in the future on this subject. I just, myself, out of frustration, built a new system. I, for the very first time, am trying an AMD Ryzen system, and so far I'm quite happy. I chose it because they are at what's called the 4th generation for these M.2 cards, which is giving even faster read-write speeds. And so I thought I'd give that a try, and I'm quite pleased with that. But in a couple of weeks, when Edius releases version 10, I kind of have a feeling that I'm going to be building a second system using Intel, the latest Intel 10th generation processors. And so I will be able to kind of compare the results, and I can share those with you in case you're thinking of also doing a new build, a new system that will work the best with Edius 10. I was thinking the other day, it's kind of funny, this could be the year of the 10 for Edius editors. I know it's 2020, kind of a strange year for everyone, but for Edius editors, it could be the year of the 10, the year that we start using Edius Pro 10 on Windows 10 using Intel processors that are 10th generation. And I'm hoping that all of those 10s, as they begin to work together, will give us all of the real-time playback that we've been looking for as we begin to now even work with 6K and 8K video. So I look forward to sharing my findings with you. If you're interested in a new build yourself, come back. If you haven't yet subscribed, invite you to do so that you'll be notified of any of the upcoming videos that we're planning to release. Until then, we'll see you down the road.